As I handed Alice the glass of water, I couldn't help but replay the events of that night in my mind. It had been over 2 years since that fateful evening when everything fell apart. Seeing her now, sitting on my couch as if nothing had happened, made the knot in my stomach tighten. She looked the same, yet so different. The person I had loved for 7 years was sitting across from me, but all I could see was a betrayal, the lost love, and the destruction of the life we had built together. Alice took a sip of water, looking around my small apartment with mild curiosity. "Nice place," she said, though her tone seemed more like an obligation than genuine praise. "Cut the small talk, Alice," I said, sitting down across from her. "Why are you here?" She placed the glass down on the coffee table and sighed. "Sam, I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but I never got to explain. I never got to tell you my side of things. You just disappeared. No goodbye, nothing. I came home, and you were gone. I didn't even know where you were until now." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "You really don't get it, do you? I told you exactly what would happen if you went through with that date, and you went anyway. I warned you, Alice. I told you that if you walked out that door, you were walking out of this marriage. But you didn't care. You left anyway." Her face flushed, and for a moment she looked like she might cry. But Alice wasn't the crying type, at least not the Alice I remembered. "You're being unfair," she said. "You don't know everything that happened that night." I laughed bitterly. "I know enough. Sylvia made sure of that when she called me at 1 o'clock in the morning to let me hear it firsthand. Do you remember that? Because I sure do." Alice's face turned pale. She opened her mouth to speak but closed it again, unsure of what to say. "I don't need to know more," I continued. "I heard it, Alice. I heard you with another man. The one thing I had always feared. The thing I had warned you about. It happened. It happened. And for what? A party with your best friend?" "Don't talk about Sylvia like that," Alice snapped, suddenly defensive. I stood up, anger bubbling inside me. "Sylvia is the reason we're sitting here right now. She's been poisoning our marriage for years. Every time you went to one of her parties, I begged you not to go. I tried to make you see what she was doing, but you always chose her over me. And now look where that got us." Alice shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "You don't understand, Sam. I wasn't planning to do anything that night. I swear, Sylvia asked me to dress up because she wanted to mess with Todd. She didn't like him and wanted me to get his hopes up, then ditch him. It was just supposed to be a joke." "A joke?" I asked, incredulous. "Do you have any idea how stupid that sounds? You went out with another man, dressed like you were going to seduce him, all for a joke. And you expect me to believe that nothing was going to happen?" She stood up, frustration written all over her face. "Yes, because it's the truth. I didn't sleep with him, Sam. I didn't cheat on you. Then what the hell did I hear on the phone, Alice?" I demanded, stepping closer to her. "What was that? Because it sure as hell sounded like you and Todd." Alice stared at me, her mouth open but no words coming out. She seemed to be searching for an explanation, something to make me believe her. But the silence stretched between us, and in that silence, I found my answer. "That's what I thought," I said, turning away from her. "You can't even deny it, can you?" She sank back down onto the couch, her hands trembling as she buried her face in them. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that," she whispered. "I never meant to hurt you." I turned around, my voice low and cold. "But you did. You hurt me in the worst way possible. I trusted you, Alice. I loved you. And you threw it all away for what? A party? A thrill? What was it worth?" She looked up at me, her eyes red and filled with regret. "I know I screwed up, Sam. I know that now. But I came here because I want to make it right. I want us to try again." "Try again?" I repeated, almost laughing at the absurdity of it. "There is no us anymore, Alice. You killed that the night you walked out on me." Alice got up and moved toward me, reaching out to grab my hand, but I stepped back. Please, Sam. I made a mistake, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling, we can talk, we can... I cut her off, shaking my head. No, Alice. We can't. It's too late for that. You made your choice 2 years ago. You chose Sylvia and Todd, and whatever the hell that night was. You didn't choose me. And now, I've moved on. Her face crumpled as tears finally spilled down her cheeks. I don't want to lose you. You already did, I said quietly. You lost me the second you walked out that door, and I'm not coming back. Alice sank onto the couch, her shoulders shaking as she cried into her hands. For a moment, I felt a flicker of the love I used to have for her, but it was quickly snuffed out by the weight of everything that had happened. The pain, the betrayal. It was too much to forgive. I walked over to the door and opened it, gesturing for her to leave. You need to go, Alice. There's nothing left for you here. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading, but I didn't budge. After a long pause, she slowly stood up and walked toward the door. Just before stepping out, she turned back to face me one last time. Sam, she said, her voice shaking, I'll always love you. I'm sorry for everything. I didn't respond. I simply closed the door behind her. As the door clicked shut, I leaned against it, feeling the weight of finality settle over me. For the first time in 2 years, I realized that I was finally free. Free from the pain, the doubt, and the heartbreak. Alice was part of my past now, and that's where she would stay. I walked back to the couch and sat down, staring at the TV but not really watching it. My mind was too busy processing everything that had just happened. Alice had found me after all this time, and for a brief moment, part of me had wondered if maybe we could fix things. But now I knew the truth. Some things just couldn't be fixed, and I was okay with that. Alice sat across from me, her face a mixture of defiance and desperation. She had clearly come with a purpose, to win me back. But that purpose felt hollow, like someone chasing after a lost cause without even realizing it. My heart, which once might have softened for her, had turned cold long ago. She recounted her side of the story, how the events at Sylvia's party spiraled out of her control. Yet none of it changed the one fact that mattered to me. She had walked out that door. She was going to hit the jackpot that night. Alice began recounting her recollections of Todd hovering over her all night at the party. She spoke about how other men had noticed her, how she had danced with several, and how, as the night wore on, she started to feel dizzy. I sat, listening but unmoved. It felt like she was talking about someone else entirely. Someone who once loved me, but had chosen to go where I told her not to. She described how Sylvia had urged her to dress provocatively for the party, even though Sylvia had some ulterior motives. I didn't know it was going to end up the way it did, Alice insisted. I thought I was just helping Sylvia deal with a guy she didn't like, but then I started to feel strange, and the next thing I knew, I was in one of the spare bedrooms. My stomach twisted slightly, but I kept my composure. Alice continued, recounting how she slowly became aware of being drugged and assaulted, how the situation spiraled beyond her control. I thought I was with you, she said, her voice breaking slightly. It wasn't until I heard someone else's voice that I realized I wasn't. Her eyes searched mine, hoping to find a flicker of sympathy, some sign that I might soften to her plight. But I had already made up my mind long ago. You should have never gone, I said bluntly. I warned you what would happen. You ignored me. She flinched at my words but kept going, her tone now more frantic as she tried to convince me. She told me about going to the hospital afterward, the traces of drugs found in her system, the police investigation, and how she sued the men involved, including Todd and Sylvia, and even one. But none of that mattered to me. Not anymore. I didn't do it willingly, Sam, Alice pleaded, her voice rising in desperation. I was drugged. Can't you understand that? I would have never cheated on you if I had a choice. You did have a choice, Alice, I countered coldly. You chose to walk out that door. You knew how I felt about Sylvia and those parties. You knew what kind of people they were. what happened at those parties. And yet you still went. That's where the betrayal started. She looked at me, a mixture of frustration and disbelief in her eyes. But that's different. I didn't choose to be drugged. I didn't choose to be assaulted. I stood up, pacing slightly, my emotions simmering beneath the surface. It's not just about that night, Alice. It's about the night you left, knowing I told you not to go. You showed me exactly where I stood with you when you walked out that door. You chose another man's company over mine. You chose to be with a group of people you knew I couldn't stand. And you ignored the fact that I told you it would end our marriage. Sam, that's not fair, she said, her voice pleading. You're holding me accountable for something that wasn't even my fault. I turned to face her, feeling the bitterness rise in my throat. I told you what would happen if you left, and you left anyway. So don't stand here now, acting surprised that I don't want anything to do with you anymore. I was clear from the start. Tears rolled down Alice's cheeks, but I could tell she wasn't ready to give up. She stood up, a fire burning in her eyes. I'm not giving up on us, Sam. I love you. I always have, and I always will. I'm going to fight for you. I shook my head, the sadness of it all finally hitting me. You can't fight for something that's already gone, Alice. There is no us anymore. Just as the words left my mouth, the front door opened and Beverly walked in. She was vibrant, with a confident stride and an easy smile. Hey, babe, what's for dinner? She asked, her eyes twinkling as she caught sight of me. Then she noticed Alice and raised an eyebrow. Oh, hi. You must be Alice. Beverly walked over, giving Alice a friendly hug that surprised both of us. Nice to meet you. Sam's mentioned you a couple of times. Alice looked bewildered as Beverly released her and turned to me. We're still going to Angelo's, right? I'll go change. With that, Beverly disappeared into the bedroom, leaving Alice and me in an even more awkward silence. Alice's face was pale, her lips trembling as she struggled to process what had just happened. Does she know we're still married? She asked quietly. She does, I said. But she also knows there's nothing between you and me anymore. I've made that clear. Alice's eyes filled with tears again. I'm not going to divorce you, Sam. I can't. I love you. I sighed, feeling the weight of the entire conversation pressing down on me. Alice, it's over. It's been over since the night you left for that party. There's nothing you can do to change that now. You can stay in town if you want, but it won't make a difference. We're done. For a moment, she just stood there, staring at me with tear-filled eyes. Then she turned and walked out the door without another word. The finality of it hit me, but there was no relief, no satisfaction, just the quiet emptiness of knowing something that had once been beautiful was now irreparably broken. Beverly emerged from the bedroom, radiant as ever. Gone for good? She asked, adjusting her earrings. She should be, I said, my voice a bit heavier than I intended. Beverly wrapped her arms around my waist, pulling me close. Good, because I'm not letting you get away from me. I smiled down at her, but deep down, a small part of me still felt the sting of the past. Give me 10 minutes, and I'll be ready for dinner. As I walked to the bedroom to change, I realized that life, as complicated and messy as it could be, always moved forward. I couldn't go back and undo what had happened between Alice and me, but I could choose what happened next. Would I ever be able to let go, or would Alice forever haunt the corners of my mind? With those thoughts swirling, I drifted into a restless sleep, caught between two worlds, the one I had left behind and the one I was trying to build. But I had already made my choice.